It's my great pleasure to invite our senators, Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, back to the stage for a brief conversation. Hey, guys. Thanks, John. So, Senator Wyden, with Senator Bingham's retirement, it looks like you'll be the next chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Given the importance of energy and natural resources to Oregon, as chair, what is your short-term and long-term set of priorities for the committee?
John, there are a couple of areas that I think are especially important. The first is that while there's a lot of talk in Washington, D.C. about the fiscal cliff, we've got a lot of Oregon rural communities facing their own fiscal cliff. So back in 2000, I wrote the Timber Payments Law, and I wrote the 3 extensions, and Oregon's share under that law has been about $2.6 billion. Even with that, there is an immense amount of hurt now in rural Oregon. So we're going to have to learn from this last decade plus, and there are really 2 priorities in terms of rewriting federal policy in this area. The first is Oregon needs to find a lot more friends as we build this coalition. So, for example, people who want to develop energy in federal waters, just as we want more active management of timber on federal lands, they are a natural kind of coalition for us. And so I was in Louisiana for Senator Landrieu, in Alaska for Senator Murkowski. We're going to have to build a new coalition there. And of course, we do need more active management. These fires that we're seeing, they're not natural fires. They're coming about as a result of years and years of neglect. And there I'm going to use as the model the East Side Forest Agreement, where we got the timber industry and the environmental folks to work together. Second, very briefly, we've got to modernize our energy policy. Our energy policy was last updated before the natural gas revolution in 2007. So natural gas, a strategic American advantage, 50% cleaner than the other fossil fuels. We're going to look to tap all those opportunities, have a significant debate about how we can come up with a balanced approach, because there's a lot of interest, as you all know, in exporting natural gas. And I also want to make sure that Oregon renewables, particularly the ones that have gotten short shrift, biomass, hydropower, geothermal, also play a bigger role in delivering energy.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a very ambitious program. Senator Merkley, we obviously here at the plan highlight our workforce and education as key initiatives. From your position on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee, how can the federal government help us on that?
John, thank you. And earlier this year, I had the chance to launch a Made in Oregon tour, where I went around the state, and many of you hosted me in your manufacturing facilities, and thank you for doing so. And the main reason I was there was to both see what changes are occurring in the modern manufacturing enterprise, and they are substantial, but to, most importantly, to ask the managers and the CEOs, what is it that is most important in terms of further expanding manufacturing in Oregon? And the certainly issues such as infrastructure and access to capital came up, and there's a bunch I could say on that, but specifically the issue you've asked about is the issue that came up most often. That is a trained workforce. And it surprises me that this is such a challenge so consistently around our state, because if you think about it, it's a win-win. You have employers who absolutely have positions and need trained workers, and you have Oregonians who desperately want living wage jobs. And so how do you make those come together? And the answer is that we aren't doing it as well as we could, and that goes to the heart of your question on what we can do at the federal level. And one of those is we need to reintroduce vocational training back into our middle schools and our high schools. No, I benefited, I had a mind that was wired for math and science, but I benefited from growing up making things in the garage and making things in school. I took every shop class there was, and so there was a connection about what's possible between the real world and the theoretical world. And in addition, we need to have curriculum that really emphasizes preparation on the theoretical side. That is in terms of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or STEM. So we have two major opportunities at the federal level. One is the Workforce Investment Act, and the second is the replacement of No Child Left Behind. On the Workforce Investment Act, we have a chance to emphasize vocational training. If you think about it, how STEM and vocational training go together is whether you are going to look for an apprenticeship or a two-year technical degree or even a higher degree and a master's or a doctorate in physics or mathematics or engineering, these things provide the foundation for the whole spectrum. And so Workforce Investment Act, and second, No Child Left Behind, inserting, and this bill came through committee this last year. I championed the STEM section of it. It was adopted on a bipartisan basis. And not only is it kind of the instructional strength, it's also the things that go with it, such as robotics competitions and so forth. But if we emphasize those two things, I think those will go as a long ways to helping seize this win-win opportunity for workers and for growing Oregon manufacturing.
Well, I think your comments about vocational training and technical training certainly hit a resonating note here with this group, so you'll have our support on that as well. Turning back to you, Senator Wyden, in addition to your committee chairmanship on the Energy Committee, you chair the Subcommittee on International Trade and Competitiveness. What things do you see that would help us in Oregon to maintain our competitive position internationally?
John, we're going to obviously have to think through our position with respect to China. They, of course, are our leading trade partner. What we want to do in Oregon, the centerpiece of our economic thinking, is to grow things in Oregon, make things in Oregon, add value to them in Oregon, and then ship them somewhere. That's sort of my kind of guiding philosophy. Now, with respect to China, and I'm a trader in my bones. I've voted consistently for market opening trade agreements. Free trade cannot mean trade free from rules. And we are going to have to think through our relationship with China around those kinds of principles. It's an enormously important market to Oregon. But if you just say the trade rules don't matter, we've done that before. And the world really got hammered as a result. So that's the first point on trade. Second point on tax reform. The last time the country took on the kind of tax reform I've introduced with Senator Dan Coates, the Republican from Indiana, the country created 6.3 million new jobs. I'm not going to say every one of those new jobs came about through tax reform. But obviously, when you have a code that in effect is incomprehensible to virtually everybody, and it doesn't encourage productivity, you've got to find a way to bring Democrats and Republicans together. That will be a second point. The third point on the education issue, and I very much agree with Senator Merkley's point, I think we are at a fork in the road with respect to federal education policy. It has always been about access. I'm in favor of that. That's why the loans and grants and scholarships are so important. But when you look at the kind of headlines we saw in the paper this weekend, with Oregon families up to their eyeballs in debt, debt that looks like it's just going to go on and on and on, in addition to access to education, we have got to add a new feature to promote value, so that employers get more value out of the federal education and training dollars, and workers do. And I'll be working with Senator Merkley on those issues as well.
And whatever we can do to help that, I think the business plan clearly is completely in alignment with those objectives. So turning back to you, Senator Merkley, there were some comments earlier about infrastructure. You're in a position to give us some advice about what the federal government's policy is going to be about infrastructure, given the deficit and debt issues that the federal government places. Can you give us some guidance on that?
Absolutely. If we step back for just a moment and think about the path ahead, we're in a situation where we are underinvesting in education, and it's not just the dollars, it is the value that Senator Wyden has referred to, but we're also underinvesting in infrastructure. China is spending 10% of their GDP on infrastructure, and many of you have had a chance probably to see China 10 years ago and recently, and it's just unbelievable what they've built in a 10-year period. Europe is spending 5% of its GDP on infrastructure, and America is spending 2%. And not only are we spending only 2%, but we have the additional task of not just building new infrastructure, but repairing aged infrastructure that's hitting 50-plus years and needs a lot of work. And we've seen that certainly in our bridge challenges. So here we are with the goal of taking and putting our budget long-term back on track. And just a framework for that is we're looking at the last time we had a balanced budget, we raised and spent about 20% of GDP. Now we're raising about 15%, we're spending 23%. That 7% gap, or 7 to 8% gap, is driving our deficit. And yet, even within that, our infrastructure is lagging behind. Well, when you have essentially a recession, and I guess technically economists would say we're out of the recession, but we're still bumping along the bottom, and when interest rates are so low, is a perfect time to help to use infrastructure and those low rates to get the best deal for America, best deal in terms of putting people back to work, absolutely, but also the best deal in terms of developing that infrastructure for the next generation, for the economy of the future, when it costs the least amount to the public budget. And so there's a couple key pieces of this I just wanted to mention. One is that we had only a 1-year transportation bill. We need a 5-year transportation bill to lay out that vision for infrastructure. And a big piece of that is we need to sustain the framework for projects of regional and national significance. In the Senate, I was able to put in an amendment that preserved that framework. Now, why is that framework so important? We will not be able to fund bridges like a new bridge, new I-5 bridge over the Columbia River, if we don't have the framework for projects of regional and national significance. So this is a piece I'm immersed with my Republican colleagues working to preserve that structure. I think all of you are well aware that we're host to the last stoplight on the corridor from Mexico to Canada, and that this is a huge challenge. And it's not a challenge just to our shipping of goods, it's also a challenge to our local metro economy. And so we need to make sure we preserve that framework and seize the moment, wrap up the plans for the design. I say that because we spent over $100 million in the design phase. And I think the public is saying, well, where's the bridge? So let's get it built. Let's get this bridge built. I just want to close with a 30,000-foot observation, which is we have been spending a tremendous amount of funds on overseas bases and overseas wars. Last Thursday, the Senate voted for the first time in the 11-year history of Afghanistan war to end this war, to get our full transition to Afghan leadership by the middle of 2013, to end our combat role by the end of 2014, and get our folks home, and to ask the President to accelerate the plan if at all possible. This is important on many fronts, but related to the infrastructure, think of what $120 billion a year can do if you take a third of that and you apply it to the deficit, and you take a third and you apply it to education, and you take a third of that $120 billion and you put it into infrastructure. Then we're both reducing the deficit and creating jobs and tackling these two main goals that are at the heart of building the future economy.
Thank you, Senator. As you've heard already today and as in our materials, this infrastructure reconstruction is a very important and key long-term element of our competitiveness as a state, and we thank you very much for your support on that. We have a couple of minutes left, and so with some degree of trepidation, I will ask you both, are we going to get this fiscal cliff thing solved?
First of all, I think we need to understand what's at stake. If you don't do it by the end of the year, more than 100 million middle-class families see their taxes go up. So this has enormous ramifications, and I want it understood how important I think that is. You know, the middle class drives the economy. It's a consumer-driven economy. So this is hugely important to get this done by the end of the year. The two pieces that are driving the big challenges for the federal budget are Medicare and taxes. If you look at Medicare, and particularly the demographic kind of challenge, if nothing is done, essentially Medicare will consume the entire federal budget. So all the things on the Oregon business plan list, all the things that Senator Merkley and I appreciate, the question of infrastructure, the question of colleges, the question of technology policy, the kinds of partnerships, folks, there will not be the money for all of those things unless the country figures out a way to protect the Medicare guarantee and fund it responsibly. I've got the welts on my back to show for this whole kind of discussion over the last few years, but that to me is what's important out of these negotiations. You're not going to completely reform the tax code or completely reform Medicare to protect the guarantee and hold down costs in 3 to 4 weeks. What we've got to do is lay the foundation so that by early next year, by say June of next year, you then have a major fix for this broken system that's led to the fiscal cliff, and that's what I'm committed to doing, and that's what we'll be talking to you all about in the town hall meetings and the discussions ahead.
Thank you. And Senator Merkley.
I'm going to try not to repeat what Senator Wyden just said, but I think he has it about right. There are some pieces of this situation that hit very hard and very immediately on January 1st. The payroll tax hits very hard. Unemployment extension hits very hard. Sequestration, which is about a 15% across the board, program by program reduction, hits very hard both on defense and non-defense programs. And if those things occur in that fashion, we are going to see an economy which drops by various estimates 2 to 4% over what it would otherwise have been, probably going from very modest growth to going deeper in the ditch. And that would be a lose-lose for everybody in America, and that's why the stakes on this are so high. It isn't that every piece of the puzzle has to be worked out by January 1st. I can almost guarantee, having witnessed the legislative process and how easy it is. You know, the Senate, you've got the routine effort to drive a filibuster on every single thing we do, and that means a supermajority is required on very complicated stuff. Everything won't be worked out, but pieces need to happen by January 1st. Pieces that affect the direct payroll tax, the unemployment tax, and the tax extenders. We have industries that have developed their pro formas on the basis of a vision for what the costs are in terms of their tax payments that are big drivers. The production tax credits in the wind industry is a good example. There's other energy tax credits that those things need to be worked out so that the decisions can be made on the business front to go forward, so we don't have that shockwave hit us on January 1st. So the crystal ball says that there'll be a lot of messiness about this, but we really have a responsibility, a bipartisan responsibility to the people of America to come together and get the outlines of a plan for the big picture, but to take care of the things that will hit us very hard on January 1st immediately.
Thank you both
Going to be
very
a
much.
piece of cake.
Yeah, I was going to say that I hope all of you got the clear prediction out of that as to what date this was going to occur.
Thanks, John.
So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it very much. Thanks for being a part of this. We appreciate it.